The House of My Mother, Daughter's Quest for Freedom by Shari Franke. Plot summary. Shari Franke's The House of My Mother is a searing, unflinching memoir that chronicles the psychological and emotional torment she endured as the eldest daughter in the now notorious 8-passengers family whose picture-perfect Mormon household captivated millions on YouTube. While concealing harrowing pattern of abuse, this book is not only personal testimony of survival, also scathing expose on toxic family systems, religious extremism, and the performative nature of influencer culture. At the heart of this memoir is the painful duality of Shari's upbringing, childhood crafted for public admiration on one of YouTube's most followed parenting channels, and private life dominated by control, manipulation, and emotional deprivation. From the very beginning, Shari paints a chilling portrait of her mother, Ruby Franke, whose devotion to obedience and discipline soon escalates into authoritarian rule. What initially appears as structured parenting quickly spirals into rigid, fear-based regime in which basic rights, such as food, warmth, and affection, are weaponized tools of control. Shari recounts early memories of being singled out, shamed, and silenced. Her mother imposed harsh punishments for minor misbehaviors, sometimes isolating her for days at a time. Despite moments of public praise and staged warmth on camera, Shari was often emotionally abandoned in private. Over time, she became hypervigilant, internalizing the belief that love was conditional and that safety depended on compliance. Her inner world narrowed to survival. The story takes a darker turn with the introduction of Jodi Hildebrandt, a licensed therapist and founder of ConneXions, life coaching program steeped in shame-based, pseudo-religious ideology. Ruby, already immersed in extreme interpretations of Mormon doctrine, began to fully Hildebrandt's belief system, which framed suffering as a sign of moral failure and justified the infliction of pain as loving discipline. Through Hildebrandt's influence, Ruby became more fanatical, even crueler. As Shari matured, so too did her resistance. Through hushed conversations with friends, secret journaling, and growing curiosity about life beyond the walls of her home, she began to question the reality she had been forced to accept. But speaking wasn't just discouraged. It was dangerous. In the Franke household, dissent was met with shaming sessions, forced apologies, and public rebukes, sometimes broadcast to millions. The weight of this double life, smiling for subscribers while suffering in silence, began to erode Shari's sense of self. At college, with distance came clarity. For the first time, she encountered adults who did not believe that children were inherently evil or that authority equated to love. Slowly, Shari began rebuilding her fractured identity, finding her voice in dorm hallways, late-night conversations, and therapy sessions. She also began documenting her experiences, determined to one day speak the truth. That truth finally exploded into the public sphere in 2023 when one of her younger siblings escaped and alerted neighbors, triggering police investigation that led to the arrest of both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt on multiple counts of aggravated child abuse. The world watched as the 8-passengers brand, once praised for wholesome content, collapsed under the weight of its deception. Finally, a post accompanied by an image of police car outside her family home sent wave of support and curiosity through the internet. But behind that single word lay years of suppressed pain, guilt, and fierce love for her siblings, who were still entangled in the chaos she had barely escaped. In the House of My Mother, Shari breaks her silence. She reveals the punishing rules of ConneXions, the erasure of empathy within her household, and isolating reality of being gaslit by her own family in front of an audience of millions. She details the moments of awakening that led to her departure, and the emotional fallout that followed. Her testimony is raw and intimate, balancing despair with defiance, sorrow with hope. What makes this memoir so powerful is not just its shocking subject matter, but Shari's voice, honest, intelligent, wounded yet fiercely compassionate. She does not write from a place of vengeance, but from a desire to protect, educate, and ultimately to heal. She extends empathy even to those who hurt her while drawing clear lines between accountability and forgiveness. Her narrative is interwoven with reflections on the psychology of abuse, the mechanics of coercive control, and the dangers of religious extremism when mixed with internet celebrity. Shari also challenges the audience. We complicit in when we consume family vlogs without questioning them. What harm is perpetuated when discipline is repackaged as virtue for entertainment, and how many other children remain voiceless under the guise of parental authority. In the final chapter, Shari describes reconnecting with estranged siblings, undergoing therapy, and learning to navigate life free from her mother's shadow. While her wounds are deep, her resilience shines. She's not just reclaiming her past. She's building a future in which transparency, autonomy, and love are no longer conditional. The House of My Mother is not an easy read, but it is necessary one. It holds mirror to the dark-sided influencer culture, urgent questions about child welfare, and gives voice to survivors who are too often silenced. Above all, it is a story of courage, the kind that doesn't just speak out, but speaks forward. Critical review. In the House of My Mother, Daughter's Quest for Freedom, Shari Franke offers blistering memoir that unpacks the perilous contradictions of growing up in a household that was simultaneously domestic prison and YouTube sensation. Is the eldest daughter of Ruby Franke, former matriarch of the now infamous 8 Passengers family vlog. Shari tells the story not only of abuse and trauma, but of awakening defiance and healing. The book has quickly becoming cultural flashpoint and topping bestseller lists, not just for its topical relevance, but for the raw power of its testimony. At its core, The House of My Mother is survivor's narrative told with emotional clarity and narrative control that belie Franke's youth. Yet the memoir is also a sweeping indictment of multiple institutions: the influencer economy, religious extremism, child-rearing norms rooted in shame, and the public's complicity in digital voyeurism. Franke's story transcends personal grievance. It is sociocultural reckoning. From the outset, the book establishes grim paradox. The more perfect the Franke family appeared to its 2.5 million YouTube subscribers, the more dysfunction and cruelty brewed behind closed doors. This disconnect is key theme of the memoir. On camera, Ruby Franke was composed, moralistic mother dispensing wholesome advice about parenting in a Mormon household. Off camera, she was an authoritarian figure whose obsession with obedience morphed into systemic psychological abuse. Franke recalls being denied basic needs, meals, bedding, privacy. As punishment for seemingly minor infractions, these forms of deprivation were framed as spiritual correction, part of rigid worldview in which suffering equaled growth and disobedience was sin. As her mother fell further under the influence of life coach Jodi Hildebrandt, things worsened. The ConneXions program they embraced espoused draconian form of behavioral discipline masquerading as self-improvement. In this cultish framework, feelings were labeled distortions, and even the idea of seeking comfort or empathy was cast as weakness. One of the most disturbing revelations in the memoir is how the abuse was systematized, normalized, and in many ways celebrated by the family and by their massive online following. YouTube audience was unknowingly complicit, often praising Ruby's firm but loving style. Meanwhile, viewers remained oblivious to the mounting damage done to the children in the name of discipline and order. Franke shows how easily abuse can be masked by moral posturing, especially in digital spaces where curated personas supplant authentic human relationships. Shari's prose is spare but cutting. Her tone is not vindictive but dispassionate, even clinical at times, as though her distance is necessary to recount what is essentially psychological horror. Yet there are also moments of immense vulnerability. Fragments of journal entries, recollections of confusion and shame, and reflections on guilt for leaving siblings behind. The narrative is shaped less like chronological autobiography and more like tapestry of confession and recovery. This structure allows Franke to explore not just what happened to her, but how she processed it, survived it, and is now working to transcend it. Significant portion of the book is devoted to her path out, the slow emergence into autonomy, her tentative steps into the world outside her family's ideology, and the initial culture shock of college life. These chapters are among the most moving in the memoir. Franke's re-entry into world kindness wasn't conditional, where love didn't come with caveats, and where forgiveness didn't require submission, reads like revelation. Her decision to eventually speak out publicly, culminating in her viral, finally, a post after her mother's 2023 arrest, feels like both catharsis and an act of justice. In evaluating the book critically, it's important to note that The House of My Mother is not comprehensive expose of the 8 Passengers saga, or the legal proceedings surrounding Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, nor is it voyeuristic recounting of the worst abuses. Shari is careful in her disclosures, choosing to focus more on her internal journey than on cataloging every act of cruelty. Some readers expecting forensic accounting may find this disappointing, but others will appreciate the restraint and dignity with which Franke handles her material. This is not tell-all. It is reclaiming. The memoir's greatest strength lies in its thematic depth. Franke does not limit herself to describing her pain as she interrogates its roots. She examines how religious orthodoxy can be weaponized to justify control, how the architecture of social media rewards performative parenting, and how systems of silence persist in both virtual and physical spaces. She also touches on the psychology of trauma, illustrating how children normalize suffering, and often carry shame well into adulthood. These insights elevate the memoir from the personal to the universal. That said, the book is not without its limitations. The prose, while emotionally resonant, is occasionally uneven. Some passages verge on repetition, especially in the middle third, where the themes of isolation and manipulation are revisited with slightly diminishing returns. In striving for clarity and accessibility, some of the philosophical reflections may come across as underdeveloped. Readers familiar with trauma literature might find echoes of other memoirs. Educated by Tara Westover, The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, but without quite the same narrative cohesion or literary flair. However, these are minor shortcomings in an otherwise powerful account. What truly distinguishes The House of My Mother is its timing and cultural resonance. Released in the aftermath of Ruby Frank's very public downfall and amid growing criticism of family vlogging, the book arrives as cautionary tale for the digital age. Frank is not just telling her story. She's challenging an entire genre of content creation that places children under constant surveillance in the name of entertainment and profit. The memoir issues implicit call for reform, for better protections for children in media, for greater scrutiny of influencer families, and for redefinition of what it means to be a good parent. It's rare for memoir to achieve so many things at once: personal catharsis, public indictment, and social critique. The House of My Mother does all three while maintaining an emotional core that is both raw and compassionate. Shari Franke is not merely whistleblower or survivor. Thoughtful narrator and brave young woman navigating the complexities of identity, grief, and justice. In the end, what lingers is not just the horror of what happened, but the extraordinary grace with which Frank reclaims her voice. This is memoir that will stay with readers not because of its sensational subject, but because of the clarity with which it asks one central question. How do we find freedom when the people who were supposed to love us the most were the who broke us? Verdict. 4.5 of courageous and deeply introspective memoir that exposes the perils of parental authoritarianism, religious zealotry, and influencer culture, all through the lens of one young woman's fight to survive and speak the truth.